that's kind of the idea there, isn't it? Like, I think there's a lot of hints in this story that that's what happened, even though it doesn't fully say it out loud. Yeah. Yeah. Roger?
I like agree with Xavier. Like throughout the whole story, it is just so awkward. And then at the end when they're eating fish, I'm like, this is like, wait, that's how their mom died. I legit thought he was getting it.
Right. And did you notice when it says, and we'll look at this a little bit more closely, but where he says, what kind of fish is it? And the dad says, just fish. That is like the moment where you get the chills. You're just like, oh no, what has this father done? There's other hints throughout that might be, but I think it's that ominous tone, right? That awkward, but also like dangerous tone. Yeah.
I was also gonna say, I feel like it's almost like a bit past between them.
Yeah.
That like maybe the son did something from like the past that maybe like loses. So you can just tell like the fact that they don't fall.
Yeah, like there's so much left unsaid. Seems to be something bad that happened, and yet nobody really full on mentions it, and so that kind of creates this eerie tone as well. Yeah. Yeah. Does anyone else speak on something? Oh yeah, machine short. Okay, so I think I love that you guys caught that. No shame. Did anyone not catch that little eeriness at the end where it seems like the father might have? Yeah, I think the first time I read it, I was kind of in a hurry and I didn't fully catch it. I was just sort of like, well, that was an abrupt ending. Like that seems random that they had this like dinner and now that's the end of the story. Ash, were you saying you too?
Yeah, I was gonna say like it makes it seem like it's more likely to happen, especially after he like avoided telling her about that his friend committed suicide and killed his family.
Yeah, he's talking about his friend, right? And he talks about how his friend, what is his name, Watanabe? That his friend killed himself. And he says that the friend is kind of an honorable person. Let's start looking at the actual text. So look at page 134. So the son says, I'm sorry to hear about the firm, I said, when neither of us had spoken for some time. He nodded gravely. In fact, the story didn't end there, he said. After the firm's collapse, Watanabe killed himself. He didn't wish to live with the disgrace. I see. We were partners for 17 years, a man of principle and honor. I respected him very much. Will you go into business again, I said. I am in retirement. I'm too old to involve myself in new ventures now. Business these days has become so different. Dealing with foreigners, doing things their way. I don't understand how we've come to this. Neither did Watanabe, he sighed. A fine man, a man of principle. So in that section, he doesn't tell the son that Watanabe not only killed himself, but also killed his family, right? This story is very dark. I should have given you maybe some warnings for this one, but he doesn't reveal that part of the story, right? And he says twice that this man Watanabe is a man of principle who the father respects. Yeah, Ash. Yeah, exactly. So this starts as a conversation about the firm and how the firm has gone under and that they are partners in the firm. So it kind of puts the father and Watanabe on the same sort of level. And then he says he was afraid of disgrace. So what does that mean maybe about the father? If he says Watanabe was afraid of disgrace, what does that mean for the father? He's afraid of disgrace, right? Exactly. So he's like, here we are. We were the same person in position, right? We were partners at this company. He was afraid of disgrace, and then he killed himself. And I say that is a man of principle. So right from the beginning, it kind of sets that ominous tone in the way that the father is talking around things. That he's not fully saying things. And wasn't that your prompt that I gave you for this one about what is not being said, right? And by kind of like reading between the lines and reading what is not being said, you start to feel like the thing that is missing is very dangerous. Yeah, Jack.
It's also not just the father. It's like the father keeps like asking the son, like, "Will you stay in Japan? Will you stay here?" And the son's like, "Maybe." Like he never responds fully.
Yes, definitely. And doesn't the sister leave things out too?
Yeah, just all of them.
None of them are fully honest with each other. None of them have like an honest relationship, it seems like. Keegan? And then
Whenever someone brings up something more emotional, other than like small talk, they change the subject like immediately after.
Yeah.
Like, I can't remember, I think the dad was like playing with, or he was showing him like this little battleship toy. And then he like talked about something, and then the son only responded to the toy and not the emotional part of the conversation. So it seems that like something, this family had emotional trauma, like really bad, like trauma.
Yeah, so like at that section, let's look at that. It's on the top of 138. So since the farm folded, he said, I have a little more time on my hands. So this is about the ship, right? So the father is kind of like revealing something vulnerable about himself, which is like what a lot of people experience when they're out of work, like this long period of boredom where they feel like they don't have like a lot of purpose in life, right? And he says, I had a little more time on my hands. So he says this in this very coded way that we're used to. And then he says, he laughed again, rather strangely. For a moment, his face looked almost gentle. A little more time. And the son says, that seems odd. You were always so busy. Like it's this way of just glossing over the fact that the father like laughed strangely and had this gentle look on his face and sort of like reflecting on like, I have so much time now. I don't have anything to do. And the son says, well, you looked almost so busy. You always seem so busy. And then the father still tries to be emotional. He says, too busy, perhaps. He looked at me with a small smile. Perhaps I should have been a more attentive father. And then look at the next section, how he responds. I laughed. He went on contemplating his battleship, then he looked up. I hadn't meant to tell you this, but perhaps it's best that I do. Again, the father's trying to reach out. It's my belief that your mother's death was no accident. She had many worries and some disappointments. And then they discuss it. We both gazed at the plastic battleship, like they're not looking at each other when they say this. Surely, I said eventually, my mother didn't expect me to live forever. So he's finally engaging in this conversation. And the father says, obviously you don't see how it is for some parents. Not only must they lose their children, they must lose them to things they don't understand, which is like potentially like a really important theme in this story. But then he spins the battleship in his fingers and says, these little gunboats here couldn't have been better glued, don't you think? Perhaps. I think it looks fine. And that's where Keegan was like, they just get back right onto the toy, right? They just said some intense things. They just said, I'm feeling purposeless because I was forced into retirement. I should have been a more attentive father. I'm sorry I was a bad father. Your mother might have killed herself because of you. Let's just talk about this battleship now. Like it is, there's so much said in that little bit, and yet they don't address any of it. Austin, what were you gonna say before?
I
And
was
then,
gonna talk about that.
oh, I'm sorry. Were you gonna say anything about it?
Not really.
Okay.
I think it's the same.
Okay, Peyton.
The closer and closer that they try to get together, like further they push each other.
Yeah, like the more, it's kind of like the more tragic the pushing apart seems, because they say these things that are hinting at the emotional trauma that Keegan was talking about, right? But yet they still keep pushing apart even when they say those kinds of things. Bridger?
So to kind of add on to that, like when he takes this photograph of like his mom and he's looking at it, and then his dad just like kind of takes back into that.
Yeah.
Like they move on, and I feel like that's almost like a sign. Like his dad might be like so depressed that like maybe that's why he's kind of like, because it seems like maybe because like when he says like, oh, it's just fish, you know.
Yeah.
You kind of get a feel like, oh, she's maybe to kill them, you know. And then also like literally like every single paragraph, I swear he's like, oh, are you hungry? You must be. You should eat.
Yeah.
Like, he's like trying to like force.
He feels almost like, it seems like he's kind of obsessed with the fish, and the fish is forefront on his mind. Yeah, I'm trying to find the photograph. Thank you. And yeah, and he kind of like takes it back. You're saying like, So I looked up and noticed my father holding out a hand. I gave him the photo. So it's like the father is not letting him think too much about the mother in this moment. Yeah, that's interesting. Ash?
So, throughout the whole story, one of the characters was sure about the future. So maybe this was like planned that they were gonna do this together, but they just didn't talk about it.
Interesting. So you're saying the son maybe knows, can read the subtext at least. Okay, so I don't know that there is, can you find evidence for the son came to visit Japan with that intention? I don't know that I see evidence for that, but I do, because of the way people don't speak to each other, I could see evidence for the idea that they all kind of know what's happening by the end. And that they're participating in it anyway. All right, we're gonna do some more close reading about this, but first let's talk about one aspect of this story that we haven't talked about yet, which is the setting. So when we're talking about the setting of a story, what kind of things are included in it? I'm gonna ask you to just describe your own setting to try and figure out that question. So if you were to describe Harriman, so somebody is going to maybe planning on moving here. Someone from out of state that they've never heard of Harriman, but they looked at houses in Salt Lake and they were like, that's too expensive. This place is called Harriman, seems nice. What would you tell them about this city to explain what it is like here? Yeah, Roger.
It's like, it's almost like, sort of like, it almost seems like it's a small town. It's like, there's other parts of it where it's like houses and stuff, and there's parts of the city.
Yeah. So it's like city architecture in some places. So you've got like in Daybreak, for example, those like little condos that create a kind of main street. I'm not from here, so maybe you can just describe it to me because I actually don't know Harriman that well. I just drive in and drive out. So it's got that like city feel in some places and like, or even a suburban feel in some places. And then it's got this farm feeling in other places where it's almost like I say this with love and affection, like there's some rednecks in Harriman, right? Yeah. Ash.
It's like surrounded by mountains.
Ah.
That, like, if you go too far in the direction, like, you can go like hiking and stuff.
Good. Creation equals hiking, so nature is very close to us. What else do we need to know about Harriman, Lydia?
There's lots of traffic and it's very busy here all of the time.
Lots of traffic. Yeah, there's always people driving, which kind of fits into this like more city feel of it. Haley,
If you get bored, there's a bunch of different activities.
like what kind? There's ice skating. Or is there anything that's like not outdoors that we should point out? Because this seems like if you're not like an outdoorsy person, don't come to Harriman. Do you guys have any like music venues or cafes or anything like that?
McDonald's.
Outdoors. So that's really important to know, I think, is like outdoorsy people are here. Peyton,
There's a lot of like nice people, but it feels almost like
what was the last part?
it feels almost like there's cliques outside of school. All the people here grew up.
Oh, okay. People here mostly grew up here. That's interesting because I think what maybe creates the clique feeling is that you've got like the farmer population that grew up here and has stayed here, right? But Harriman is growing so crazy fast. So there's a lot of people here that also didn't grow up here. Maybe that's what's forming these different cliques. Do you guys know about the Harriman Happenings Facebook page? It's like the most toxic place I've been online. They are horrible to each other. They're so mean, and I get that vibe from it. Like sometimes they're all being nice to each other, but usually when they're doing that, it's like being mean about somebody who's not there. You know?
Yeah, because like if you like see them in like stores and stuff, they'll always be like so nice. You know something that's good.
Okay, so you feel like maybe there's like this nice attitude. People are very polite, but then would you say it's going to be hard to make friends here, maybe, or is it not? Oh, okay.
Like they don't trust us.
So in that way, it's got that very small town feel.
Yeah.
Austin?
Like certain places are a lot more family friendly than others. Like Daybreak especially has like all the parks and everything, and other areas are like.
Okay, so family-friendly areas, and you're saying Daybreak is one of those places where it is family-friendly. And where should they avoid that isn't so family-friendly? My sister lives in West Jordan. I like her neighborhood. Everybody's always outside hanging out. No, all right.
But here's the
sections of
thing, if you live there, like I lived in Kearns and it's not a great place to live.
Not so family friendly. Okay, so what makes it not family friendly? Is it crime? In Kearns?
There's an unsettling amount of police sirens all the time. That's
So
it.
in surrounding areas, but isn't Harriman like fairly safe in terms of
Yeah.
crime? Like you guys don't have a lot of break-ins or anything.
Everything
Still a lot of
is safe,
fun.
even though how we're outside. I
With the
used to
South
live
Salt
in
Lake.
Kearns.
Yeah, that's much.
South Salt Lake.
We only have a couple.
What do you call them? Car break-ins? Stealing cars. Yeah,
There's
Xavier.
really not a lot of crime because there's way too many cops.
There's too many cops.
There's a lot.
Okay, too many police. Okay, let's keep it, yeah, I think we can keep it critical right here because we're trying to set a tone. Okay, Bridger.
I was just gonna kind of add on to like, I feel like everyone who lives here has either lived here their whole life, like my dad, for example, like he grew up on like a meat ranch here, like it was literally nothing.
Uh-huh.
He's lived here his whole life, and then my mom is like, has never lived here before. I feel like everyone has never lived here before, or lived here their whole life.
Okay, so they're like either entrenched or very brand new.
Yeah, it's like my mom lived in Florida her whole life when she moved here, and my dad has lived here his whole life.
Yeah, I get that vibe from here. I get that vibe in the way that people are kind of like into camps at school sometimes too. Yeah.
Gonna say, it always seems like the construction workers are working.
That's like a nerve.
I get eaten by
Never ending construction. That's a Utah thing.
for 5 years.
Haley.
Nothing has changed.
I've been here for a little over a year,
Uh-huh.
and it's kind of like,
Wait, the construction?
well, no, just everything in general. Like when you first get here, when I first got here, I was like, oh wow, this is such a pretty place. And then once I got to school, it's kind of intimidating because you could see like the different cliques of people were like going into different groups, and then they were like separated into these different neighborhoods.
Ah, okay. We're gonna call that segregation. It doesn't necessarily have to be about racial segregation, but there does appear to be then some kind of segregated areas, and that extends into your school life.
You could probably be more comfortable in those places.
Got it. Aggie?
It's packed and it's still developing. There's never a time when everything stops. Like, oh, look, there's more condos coming out. Like,
Yeah.
Is that in the distant gun? Oh, no.
There's space
still
and
going.
Utah's growing. Yeah, Zach?
I feel like there's no sense of community. I mean, I've been in neighborhoods where it's like, hey, let's all do a neighborhood activity. I'm like, sure, but here it's like once in a blue moon, someone says, yes, let's all do a neighborhood activity. And it goes, no. So, don't have a dozen. of them.
Come up to Rose Park. My neighborhood has great sense of community. It's the best. Just so you know, mine is better. Okay, last it.
I don't want
Yeah.
to like make people mad if I bring politics into it, but yeah, it feels way more conservative. Like I moved here from Portland, Oregon, like 5 years ago, and it's a whole different feel.
That's not gonna make people mad. That's just a fact, right? You guys look for conservative politicians more often in this city. The probably makeup is not as stark as Utah County, but it's far less liberal than like a Salt Lake and a West Jordan even.
there's like a lot less.
Hmm,
Like everybody knows something about somebody else.
interesting. So it's CAG, really?
Yeah.
Lots of unsaid
If you know
gossip.
someone, you see them in the hall, like I know you, but I know.
Interesting.
Like I know you, but I don't know you.
You just know.
Exactly, it's the more.
Keegan? Got it.
Pollution is so bad here.
The pollution?
Air pollution, it's bad to the point where you like can't go outside.
Yeah, let's make sure that this person knows about the inversion and the lake effect. Katie?
Okay,
You could put like people with different like incomes right now, because there's
Ah.
parts of Harriman that are like super wealthy and then others like that are just like.
Yeah, and that's another way that the neighborhoods seem to be a little bit segregated, right? Bridger?
okay, so like when you have like activities, you don't invite your community, you just invite whoever's in your ward. Like it's
Ah,
all centered around.
Let's say
church.
that.
Sure.
Like literally activities.
I mean,
it's
if
not
you're
even
not part
like-
of the church, it's
it's
a
like,
lot.
oh, you're part of it.
Okay, so that's part of the setting then, right? Is that the LDS community is like heavily influential in this community? Yeah, that's an important part to say. Haley?
Something that I've
noticed while I've been here
Yeah.
is that it's like whenever you renew and you go over to someone else's house, it's almost as if they put on a mask because my first friend that I made here, she told me about her mom and then I went to go meet her mom and her mom was completely different from what she actually like described her to me. I was like, wow, okay. And then other people I met, their family was kind of like almost concerningly too nice.
You're suspicious of
I'm
their
very
niceness.
suspicious.
So this idea of like inauthenticity maybe is stronger here than other places potentially. Now, I'll just say I've lived in other places and everyone feels a little bit fake, but Utah does have something special in the way that they they cover up some of their mistakes. Mercedes?
Along with crime, there's like a lot of like drug use.
Oh, interesting.
Especially among
When you
like
say a
younger
lot,
generation.
what do you mean?
A lot.
What kind of drugs?
All of them. I wouldn't know, I don't use them.
If you had to say what the main drug problem is at Harriman High School, it's smoking, it's vaping, kind of. Okay. Better than my high school.
Better than my mom's high school.
Peyton?
Everybody cares about like their outside appearance,
Mm.
like how they appear.
Outside appearance,
Wonderful.
very important.
Everybody wants to like please something. Like
I don't think this person's gonna move here.
No.
I don't know why I moved here.
Maybe this is partly because of the age range. There are, it seems, to correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like there are far more young families here than elderly people. Because I lived in a neighborhood with I was in San Francisco and it was all like Koreans and Vietnamese people over 60. That was my neighborhood, because that's when they could afford property in San Francisco and now no one else can. And I would say they didn't have this aspect of it. And I kind of think it was because of the age, not necessarily because of any dark like immorality.
There are
You
a
know.
lot of young families.
Yeah, okay, cool. Keegan and Bridger and
I also feel like since the age group, we're very snobby, so this is really biased. Like, if you were to take an old person here, they'd be like, oh, this place is so beautiful, and stuff like that. So I feel like we're definitely biased towards how Kentucky here is.
let's make sure we're being clear that this is from a narrative point of view, your point of view, not necessarily mine. I don't want to get in trouble with like the Harriman City Council or something. That's like, don't talk bad about our beautiful city. Yeah, there is definitely like a bias coming through as you guys are talking, the way that you kind of experience Harriman through high school, you know? Bridget?
I was just gonna say like, there's so many like basic, like everything. Yeah, it's like more white than the North
Okay,
Pole.
How much variety?
Okay, the word for this is homogeneous.
You drive by a pickleball.
Oh, sorry, I'm talking about pickleball. Yeah, it's homogeneous, right? For the most part, it's white people of a certain age, of a certain income, even though there are differences there. Ash?
I think like because German and like Canadian are like there's like tons of LDS and conservative people here. A lot of people like hide who they really are, so you don't really get to know a person and talk to them a lot more.
So maybe it's this idea is that in a community where everyone kind of is the same, there is pressure not to reveal the ways that you are different, at least outwardly. Yeah, and that might not have anything to do with political persuasion or religious orientation. It might have more to do with a community that needs to like say we all share the same sort of like values, and that's really, really important. Nat?
It just doesn't really feel like having a schedule of a place. Like I've lived other places, and it feels like people are a lot more willing to keep up themselves, and like everyone's kind of left spot. Like I used to live in a neighborhood where you just keep wherever you want, and it's like, oh, cool. And out here, it's kind of like, kind of want to be kind of the role.
That was
Got
a
it.
nice thing about.
Yeah.
very hard.
I like it about
And
my
it's
neighborhood
kinda,
too.
I'm here.
Yeah. Ashton?
I'm gonna say to continue on like how that elementary church has like lots of shit.
Huh?
I also noticed from where I used to live before and when I came here, I noticed that there's not very much like coffee shops. So I
Yeah.
feel like that's like very little coffee.
People get drunk on
Also
Swig.
with one.
Yeah.
Like, I also know that like instead of coffee shops, they're all like, so maybe they're making it for the coffee.
They are. They definitely are because coffee shops, like, to me, a coffee shop is a place that you go as like, oh, this is a cool idea, actually. So there's this idea that everyone has 2 spaces. They have their home and they have their work. So for you guys,
Picture of the board.
yeah, you can. Wait, hang on, let me tell you about this. You'll like it, I think. You have your home and you have your work, and your work for you guys is school, because that's the majority of your day. And you might have another place that's your work, and so this doesn't quite work the same way. But there's something called the third space that everyone should have in order to feel like part of a community. And that's what coffee shops or bars will serve, like in kind of like more, I don't want to say normal, but it is normal, in more normal communities, right? And so I think Swig is this like attempt to create that third place for Mormons, where it's like you can go to Swig every day and you have your usual and the person knows you and you can even hang out there. Yeah. Okay, if you don't have your hand up now, you can't put your hand up. And I'm gonna go through, because I'm gonna go through and finish this conversation. Okay, Bridget?
So first off, I feel like there's a lot of like, almost like people, like a lot of people almost like rely
Oh.
on other people's income.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then also, I'm just gonna pull it out, Diet Coke. Diet Coke.
Oh, that's
It's a culture here, right? Yeah. Yeah. Keegan?
So there's like a lot of, so I used to live in North Dakota.
Yeah.
And absolutely no one cared about religion there. But like the first person you ask when you meet someone here is like, oh, are you LDS?
Yeah, okay.
Like, there's a lot of like religious persecution, but like to like atheists, I guess.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean? Like to people who aren't a member of the church, they're like almost shunned because it's so normalized. Like, yes, it's
Okay, so the fact that it's prominent and open, it might even if it's not direct, might feel like persecution in some way. So if you were an atheist, maybe you'd want to be aware about going to Herman.
Yeah. Okay, I'm just gonna say it, but you know how in the 50s there was like that ideal household where it's like,
Yeah,
everybody stays home, and that's what Harriman is.
that is called the nuclear family.
That's what Harriman wants.
I hate that.
And that's the ideal, but not the reality, right? I mean, I think. Awesome.
Another thing, like the lack of alcohol that you see like in stores too, and like you never see bars anywhere. And I feel like there's like an alcohol store, and then whenever you see somebody go in, everybody kind of like, what are they doing?
Shame, shame, yeah. Kaylee?
If you're part of like, if you're in a specific religion, so for me, non-denominational Christian, it's hard to find a church like that because, like earlier, it's based around LDS people.
Yeah.
So it's almost as if you're not a part of LDS, you're like, they like look at you as if you're like an alien or something. They're like ew, like.
So it's like kind of backwards of like a lot of other places. So like my husband had to drive 45 minutes to church or
I
whatever.
have to do the same thing.
Yeah, and so it's kind of like it just depends on what's going on. All right. I have one more question. I don't want to open up a floodgate. One thing that seems to be missing here though is weather. We have pollution. Okay, hang on. Shh. Xavier.
The weather is almost as bipolar as the people.
Literally, it'll be July, it'll be 70 degrees one day, and like negative 45.
Okay. Yeah, Ash.
And it doesn't matter what time of year it is, it's just the weather decides.
It doesn't correspond to the seasons.
So you pass by like 8 pounds
I'm gonna add this, it's so windy here.
See, like, but also this is one of those things that you'd be like just getting things like, you have a dare from someone would dare you to go live here for a year. Like
Yeah, if you look at this board, Harriman seems awful. This is not my, let's go back to Keegan's point. This is not my impression of Harriman, really.
Wait, I want a picture.
Okay,
I will.
One thing.
okay, one thing.
If you go to the airport, don't be intimidated by the people with the welcome home sign. It's for the missionaries.
Oh, Alright. Okay, look at all the stuff we were able to say about Harriman. No, I basically am from Orem. Yeah, so not, I would say as many, if not way more worse things about Orem. I hated it.
You would not look like this.
Not necessarily, but I think Orem shares a lot in common with Harriman as I'm looking at this. We basically have, you guys are talking about segregated neighborhoods. In Orem, it's like on the west side of State Street. That's like the poor people, right? They're not, but like that's what we'd say. And the east side, that's the affluent people, and they just like did not communicate. Like in high school, like people weren't friends with each other. It was bizarre, and it was just State Street was the dividing line. And you guys said that nicotine is a problem here. Well, my high school, that was prescription drugs for sure. Yeah, that was it.
Yeah,
Was
when you put price
Rice
sauce
sauce, rice sauce.
that's an only Utah thing.
I tried to order that in Colorado.
okay. So look at this giant list, and we're going to try to generalize different things about the setting that you have to consider in order to create an accurate picture of a place for somebody else, right? So sometimes all we think about with settings is like the nature of it, or like the description of what it looks like outside, or even if you're inside, what the actual thing actually looks like, right? But notice how much we said about the kinds of people who live here. As you were saying these things, I'm hoping you weren't including yourself in that. Like, as you were saying them, weren't you kind of like, they're all fake, not me? Maybe a little bit you were thinking about yourself, but basically like, you're kind of getting a general picture of what the social circumstances are like.
That is
Haley?
beautiful.
If I could say like in one sentence what Harriman's like, it's basically like that one popular person in the school that everyone thinks has everything going on for them, but back at home, it's like everything's just falling.
That interesting.
It's like behind the
Wonderful veneer, and underneath there's so much pain and struggle.
Yeah.
You like look at it and you're like, oh my gosh, that looks like an amazing place to live. Lives in it for a year. Well,
Oh, horrible.
it's
And
not even
yet-
a year, it's like a month.
Based on your guys' description of it, they're not doing a great job of covering up
Yeah.
that sadness. Okay, wait, is this more stuff about Herman, or are we talking about setting now? Perfect, Austin?
I think that another, like, a generalization that would make it like the overall like dialogue
Yes.
with people, like, not even just like the way people pronounce things, because everyone says things stupid here.
Yeah.
But also just the things that are said and the tone of things. that are said.
Absolutely, so like, kind of the vibe of the city. You've got social makeup. You've got nature and natural landscape, and I would include weather under that. Ash? The vibe thing, could you put it in better language than that? Like, what does that mean, the vibe?
Feel the atmosphere.
Okay. Awesome. Bridger, what were you gonna say?
I was gonna say it's literally just a neighborhood.
The what?
Oh my gosh.
I can't hear the second word.
Like, you know, WandaVision, the show?
Oh,
yes.
We're being
So it feels like we're all being controlled.
People never remember.
Oh, spoiler, sorry. Ashton.
I was gonna say, I feel like, a lot of people here with the click, like, it's like they accept you, like, when you're like I'm not sure, if a group of Mormons, like, they accept you,
Yeah.
but it almost feels like, at least to me, like, I feel like sometimes I'm not accepted, if that makes sense.
You're not in on the,
Yeah, I'm in it on it, but I feel like I'm not supposed to be there.
yeah. Yeah, and so it's like, it got this feeling of like, exclusion.
Yeah,
in some
exactly.
ways. Okay, What are some other general things that we're looking at when we're thinking about setting, Peyton?
Like the interactions among the people there.
Okay, cool. So we've got communication, but we also need this interaction idea. We also have like businesses up here. Like we talked about what is not available and what is available. Did we talk about architecture at all? Yeah, kind of right here in city planning. City planning, layout, architecture. I don't know how to spell that word. I think that's it. Ash? Yeah, the problems that exist in that place. Yeah, and if you weren't so biased, maybe the joys of existing in that place too. We have some of those over here, right? The hiking and the Bridger.
So this like sort of fits in setting, but like Lake Powell, for example.
Yeah.
On your screen, you're scrolling through any social media, every single person's profile picture is them wakeboarding. Every single one.
So the joys do not exist actually in
Yeah,
there,
it's
and you have to
it's
like.
it's like St. George and like everyone goes to Moab and like.
I'm gonna put movement up there for that because we also have this thing about traffic too.
Staycation.
Yeah. So we.
To add on to that, also like the salt mine, like that's kind of.
Oh,
You're like
yeah.
on Tinder, everyone like on Instagram.
Yeah, it's true. So I think that still goes with movement too. Okay. I think this kind of covers stuff because under social makeup, we've got the political stuff, we've got the religion stuff, we've got the kind of under here city, the problems, we've got stuff about crime. Do you see anything up here that we listed that is not included in one of these categories, Ash? Oh, so we've got the dialogue here, but like we've got kind of like cultural idioms, I'll call it.
Sluffing.
Basically means where it's like sloughing to call cutting class, yes. Austin, do they use sloughing in Portland?
No, like
Cutting class, yeah. I thought it was so good. My husband's from California, like Central California, and when he heard sloughing, he thought it was like skin, like sloughing, right? He's like, that is disgusting. Why would you ever call it that? He also hates that at the store, people will ask him, normally you would say, would you like a bag? And he hates that people say sack in Utah. He's just like, why? There's a word for this. It's bag. You haven't? It's like a very like, I feel like in Magna, that's the word that they use. Okay, all right, we gotta move on. So we've got this list in green up here. I know everything's getting very messy, but this list in green is kind of like the categories of considering setting, right? Do you have another category?
I was gonna say sometimes it can be overall confusing
Harriman?
as a whole.
Just as a whole, yeah. I'm getting that from this. All right, so what you're gonna do is I tried to have you open up your Chromebooks. Those are all logged on, right? Okay, I want you to do a Google image search of traditional Japanese homes.
Beautiful. Almost no doors. I go in. It's so open and I want to live in that.
Yes.
I mean,
Okay.
like.
Okay, yeah. So cultural idioms, that's kind of another word for slang. There we go. Ashley?
Going to say, looking at the Japanese homes,
Yeah.
like comparing it to American houses, it makes American houses look very bland. Like if American houses were like if they were seasoning, they'd probably be flour.
Yeah. Maggie?
When I look at it, it seems like more just like, I don't know, it's more clean than American stuff, because like, they're like, oh, there's the couch, there's the fridge, all that stuff, but then like, that, it's just like, and here's the table with beautiful laptop.
So you notice how open and like sparse
It's
everything
so
is, right?
nice.
Not very much furniture. Yeah, Peyton.
Everything that like is set up, it's set up so efficient. Like as you walk through, you know exactly where to be.
Yeah, and what's interesting there is like, it doesn't work in the same way, at least from the images that I saw, the central, so in American homes, you walk in and there's a central space and things branch off, right? But in Japanese homes, it seems like there is an order to rooms you walk through. Yeah, Bridger?
In Japanese homes, there's like so much thought and care put into it. And then in American homes, it's just like being mass produced. Like American homes is like that one house we all draw in kindergarten.
Yeah, Kiara?
Oh, there's like a lot of natural light.
Yeah, there's a lot of like sky, like windows, what is it called? Skylights, thank you. There's a lot of like skylights, there's a lot of open doors to let light in. Yeah.
It looks like they have like more agriculture around their homes than we do. Like we have like one tree on one door.
They're surrounded.
Like.
Yeah, are you seeing the open courtyards too in those images? So a lot of times the house will be U-shaped or even square shaped and there will be a courtyard. Ashley?
I'm gonna say these homes. I noticed I'm looking at them and it looks like the backyards are sort of like in the middle of the house. So it looks like they're
Yeah.
much more private and you get more sense of privacy.
Yes, yes. Even though the doors are all open, they're all open towards the inside. Yeah. Katie?
It feels like they don't like value like this. But they don't have this around like jumping around like.
Not as many doodads and tchotchkes.
Yeah.
You know that word tchotchkes? It's like little things that you put on your shelf or whatever. Keegan?
It doesn't seem like there's like any neighborhoods, like not really like,
Hmm.
like family. I know family's like pretty important there, so I feel like family is their community and not really the people around them.
When you look, it's going to be different. Like the images that you get when you look at traditional Japanese home is going to be different than modern Japanese homes, right? And if you're curious, you can look that up. But I think that's true for these traditional kind of like settings. And Japan is like a very overcrowded place. So in any cities or in any situations like that, you're not going to have these style of homes. So it's probably the person who would have this style of home is going to be a quite wealthy person. Maybe somebody who was partner at and had an ownership over the firm, right? To think of back to our story. Peyton?
It's less like actual landscaping and more like they just trimmed nature.
Yeah, so it feels like it's more integrated with the natural landscape. Yeah, that.
Homes seem smaller in some ways, and because of the lack of furniture too, it almost feels like there's a purpose of like an RV, just like it's a place to eat, it's a place to sleep, it's not a place to like constantly be and go see the world.
To me, the house doesn't look uber comfortable. Like I really like having a big plush bed and a big plush couch. And so maybe that's the point. Maybe the point is like you're not going to spend all your time inside that house. Okay, a couple more comments and we'll move on. Austin? Yeah.
Like, I don't know, people have like a junk drawer or like some people have a table where everything just like set down and everything just.
Yeah, and I think like that's that Marie Kondo, does this marker spark joy type of attitude, right? Yeah. Haley?
I was looking through images and I came across an image where there's a table and two beds, and it's like so listed out. It's almost as if they don't want their heads up to be in the clouds, as if they want to be like down.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the idea behind those tatami mats. Yeah. I want to do it. I'm experimenting here. Just so that we don't get like too much of an idea that this is exactly what Japan looks like. Let's do home in yeah, search for home in Tokyo. Yeah, just want to be clear. So I just wanted you to see, like, it's not that everything, it does, I think the home in our story is specifically a traditional Japanese home, but I just wanted to make sure that we didn't think that everybody in Japan is living in that style of house, because that's not necessarily the case. And again, that would be that style of house. When you look at traditional Japanese home, the real estate on that thing would be really high. Like that would be a very expensive home in Japan. Yeah. Okay, yeah, Megan, mine.
when I was looking, there's always something green in the house.
Yeah.
And then, also it would like, it just seems so like uptight. I feel like just like preppy almost, like
Mm.
it seems more like, oh yeah, this is my house kind of. It's not like, oh, I'm a mess like Americans would be like, I don't have a messy couch, you know? It's like, oh, I have all the fancy things, I kind of get up, walk around and.
And
all that.
each thing has its purpose and each thing has its value and everything has been purposely chosen. Okay.
I know that working is really, really big there, like being a workaholic.
They're one of the few countries that works more hours a week than we do.
Yeah, so maybe that's why it's so minimalist, they tend to just go with sleep.
Oh, maybe so. Yeah. Keegan?
I also feel like, you know, like, kind of like you said, traditional Japanese homes are very purposeful. Everything's placed there for like a reason. Yeah. Everything's on purpose. They don't just kind of, they don't do really impulse buys. It doesn't seem like, because you don't really, like in these pictures, you don't really see it.
Yeah, so there seems to be like impulse buys, I think is great. They don't seem to be like filling their house with things just to fill their house with things. You know, like I have a blank space on my wall. I gotta find something for that space, not necessarily. Okay, last comment, and then I'm gonna tell us what to do. Matthew?
As I was looking at like the traditional houses compared to like the modern day houses, like the architecture is similar to like here in America, like crowded and it has like it all set up.
Mhm.
But then like the inside of the house is different. There's like not as much stuff, and they still only have what they need, like
Yeah.
traditional.
Yeah, okay. So with that kind of minimalist attitude, I think we can so the way that we're talking about these traditional Japanese homes like feels very positive to me. Would you, when you look at those images, you get this positive association with those images, right? And I think that this story doesn't necessarily honor that kind of vibe to the setting. So what I'm going to have you do now is I want you to find, let's do this with partners. I want you to find 5 details about the setting, and that includes any of these sort of things. 5 details about the setting in a family supper. And I want you to underline them, those 5 details. And then we're going to talk about this idea. What kind of vibe, what kind of atmosphere, what kind of mood do those 5 details create? Ashley? Because they're gonna be, the walls are gonna be like so close to each other, yeah. So they found a way to create seclusion in that courtyard setup, yeah. Okay, so you're gonna do this with a partner, you're gonna find the same 5 setting details, and then you're gonna talk about what they create for the vibe of it, the atmosphere. Let's start using the literary word for it, the atmosphere, and write to the side how that setting detail creates the atmosphere. So you'll have 5 different annotations on this in the story. Okay, go for it. About the setting. I bet we have very similar ones. Keegan, why don't you point me to one?
Okay, so on page 140, the dad is like, he's talking to his sister. He's like, terrified. And then my sister looked at him, left him. It
Yeah.
kinda shows how women and men interact in Japanese culture. Like, women are very almost like inferior to men, and it's like a very traditional household.
Yes, and I think that's the key word here is that traditional household idea, right? That she is expected to take care of the domestic stuff and he is expected to take care of the financial stuff, right? And I think that that also then starts to cast some suspicion on why he made the fish. Because usually it would be if she's in charge of the domestic stuff, usually it would be her preparing the fish, right? And doesn't he comment on this at one spot where he says he's had to learn lots of things? Oh, I can't remember it. Yeah, it says like he's not proud of having to be the one to make the dinner. I can't find that exact spot right now, but I think that that's like, so it's like you get this idea of the gender roles, but then you also get this suspicious feeling about why gender roles are being strictly enforced in some ways, but not strictly enforced in other ways. Peyton?
And it's like, it's
tells you without telling you how dark it is. Like, it's dark, this story is sad, it's not a good time.
Especially here at the end, right? Where there's stony and forbidding half light. Look at that. Well, it's your father's face looks stony and forbidding in the half light. Look at the bottom of 138 where it says that. And supper is waiting in a dimly lit room. The only source of light is the big lantern. A cloud of steam rose up and curled toward the lantern. I'm just jumping around here. He repeats many times that it's dark. So through the dialogue and through the description of setting here at the end, we get this idea of darkness just sort of like falling over this room, settling on the room. And the only kind of like movement in the darkness that they're seeing is this steam from the fish, like moving in the lantern light, you know, which is an eerie image if you really picture that. Ash?
So I'm wondering, being particularly proud of the Puritan.
Yeah.
So like, and he says that like throughout the story, he says like his friend was like brave, stuff like that, and someone to be proud of. So like, how the community sees you is very important to him, and like how like you have to be a specific way to be represented as proud.
Yes. Okay. Let me ask this. Do you remember why his mom dies or how she dies? Jack?
She definitely could go poison.
So she eats the fish, right? It explains that his mom never ate this fish until a certain moment. Look in the third paragraph of the story. Find out why the mom eats the fish. Ash?
Their kids were drawn and like the parents were not having a good time at that point, so their kids were coming.
So potentially it could be what the father said, which is that maybe this wasn't so accidental, right? But here in the third paragraph, it represents it a little bit differently, Gail. Yeah. Yeah, the phrase that it says is she was anxious not to offend. So to go back to Ash's point about the reason that the father seems to see Watanabe as an honorable person is because Watanabe has not lived in disgrace after being fired from his job. That according to the father here, who is proud of his pure samurai blood, not being a man in the household and not having a job is like embarrassing. That's the word for it. And they are constantly talking about embarrassment in this story. They don't want to speak because it might be embarrassing. They don't want to dwell too long on subjects because it might be embarrassing. Don't smoke in front of dad. That would be embarrassing and shameful. Like all of it is kind of based on this idea of shame. Do you guys know about this? Gets okay right at the end of this class. I feel like I always do this right at the end of class, like mention something very dark and then say, okay, goodbye, have fun out there. But do you know what an honorable samurai death was? Xavier?
Stab yourself in the stomach.
Yeah, and pull it across. That was the idea. So it could be called seppuku or it could be called harakiri, but it was basically like if you did something extremely shameful, if you betrayed somebody or if you had set out for a task and you did not complete it, that is the way you would kill yourself. It mostly didn't kill you. After you did it, there was somebody standing by to chop off your head. That was kind of the sort of idea of an honorable samurai death. How did Watanabe kill himself? Same way. Yeah, he stabbed himself in the stomach, right? And so this is like, I think this is the main clue right here in the setting when we hear about a traditional kind of like a traditional man living in a traditional Japanese home with a tea room and with open spaces and tatami mats and all of that. When it mentions that he had pure samurai blood, and then it talks about how he is so ashamed about being fired from his job, that's the first bit of foreshadowing that we get about the ending of this story. Ash?
In the third paragraph, it talks about her mother, like she knew that not to eat the fish, and like it says that she would always avoid it, but this certain time she accepted it and she didn't wanna feel offended.
Yeah.
Looked on a different way.
Huh? Wait, hang on, guys. We got 2 more minutes. I want
I
to do a
don't
couple more
think
things.
that, like, I think that's how she covered up wanting to.
Yes, yes, it could be. It could be that she is also committed to this traditional ideal, right? Go to page 138. There's one other thing I want to point out to you. So it mentions that fugu fish became very popular after World War II. A fish that can kill you very easily, an extremely painful death. You can eat lots of other fish. I can't imagine fugu fish tastes that much better than like tuna, right? Like it's a fish, right? But it still became very popular until they introduced regulations. And that's one moment where we hear about the war, World War II. On page 138, we also hear about the war. The father says, during the war, I spent some time on a ship rather like this, but my ambition was always the Air Force. I figured it like this. If your ship was struck by the enemy, all you could do was struggle in the water hoping for a lifeline. But in an airplane, well, there was always the final weapon. What's that a reference to, Richard? There's a reference to kamikaze pilots, right? Another way of thinking about an honorable death. So to end here, I want to just point out that this story, just like I love that Keegan pointed out that thing that we're being very biased about Harriman, this story is all from the representation, like from the view of the son, who has chosen to leave Japan and leave his traditional Japanese household, and now is back here looking at it through new eyes. All right, we're gonna do one more thing with this, so bring it back next time. And then there is actually, I'm not sure that story. No, I think I'm gonna give you a break on homework for next time. So, yeah. Concentrate on getting everything in by my end of term deadline, which is Friday.